My name is Karen Dye. Today is July 19th, 2019, and I'm interviewing Bob Coffey at the Newkirk Public Library. Bob, what motivated you to join the military?
Well, I got this letter from Uncle Sam says you either be there or we'll come and get you. I was drafted.
I thought they said greetings and salutations or something like that.
Yeah, I've still got, splinters under my nails where they dragged me off the front porch.
Tell me a little bit about your time in basic training.
I went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for basic training, and it was the middle of winter, and all I can remember, it was just cold and miserable, and we had those old barracks that left over from World War II, and I had a top bunk next to the window, and whenever it'd snow, it'd cover the bed up with snow in the morning. It was cold. And we, of course, did everything that you do in basic. But to show you how tough we were, when it come for the big bivouac at the end of your 8 weeks where you'd go out and be in the elements for a week or two, the commanding officer thought it was too cold, so we just didn't go.
Well, that was kind of nice, wasn't it?
We thought it was great. So we never, I guess I never ever slept outside in an Army tent. Because
that was a good thing.
Yeah.
What was your primary job after training?
Well, after your initial, what we used to call boot camp, I went to Fort Gordon, Georgia, and I went to a power generation school. It was MOS 624, and that was gasoline, diesel engines, and electric generation. And I went through that course, and that was a pretty short course. That wasn't but about, seemed like 8 weeks. And then after that, I became an instructor in it. And then that's all I did for the rest of my term was be an instructor. Taught AC and DC electricity and diesel and gasoline engines. It was just a 9-to-5 job, like I've got when I got out of the Army. It wasn't anything spectacular about it. There was one funny incident one time when Eisenhower was president. So, of course, he was just going out of office, and he always came down and played at the Masters golf course, which is at Augusta. So we were told we were going to go to the Masters. Well, we did. We went out and picked up trash. And then when he was supposed to come and review the troops out on the big parade ground, we took helicopters, and this was in the wintertime, we took helicopters and we spray painted the parade ground green so it looked like grass, and we went out into the forest there in Georgia and we cut limbs off of trees and we planted those all along the road where the cavalcade drove so they looked like it was pretty. And when we left, well, we went out, picked them all up and burned them. Sure got them $1 at work.
Oh my goodness. Well, it looked pretty, I guess.
Yeah, it looked nice. He was the boss.
He was indeed. He was used to being boss.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was drafted in '59, and I went. I was in for 2 years, 3 months, and 7 days, which was a weird time. But I was in that 3 months and 7 days because of the Berlin Wall. When the Russians built the Berlin Wall, it scared everybody, so they froze everybody that was in the military. You couldn't get out. So my school I was teaching in transferred out just about a month before then, and I went on a construction crew, and we repaired barracks and everything for 2 months and 7 days. So, I was a sheetrock man because I told them I knew how to do sheetrock, so I was automatically the sheetrock man. And when I got out, of course, at that time, if you were drafted, you had to serve 2 years active duty and then 7 years in reserves. Well, I only served about 3 years in reserve because they counted all that 3 years, 3 months and 7 days as active duty, and that took off from my reserve duty. So I didn't have to do much reserve duty, so I didn't do anything with it. Never went on any summer encampments or anything. I was kind of a lazy soldier, I guess. I mean, really didn't ever do anything spectacular. It was just like going to work every day.
So as a reserve, did you have to do any further training or anything?
Oh yeah, you'd meet once a month down in Ponca City and polish the vehicles and wash them and march around a little bit and come home. That's about the end of it. And they had summer camp at those days, but for some reason, and then that whole 3 years, I never had to go to any summer camp either. I was just, like I've always been in life, I was just lucky all the time.
I'll say so. So did you were never sent out of the country, never deployed?
I was supposed to go to Turkey one time to run generators in a cryptology compound. That's where they do all the secret communications. And I got clearance to do that, and they sent FBI guys here to Newkirk like they always do, and they asked everybody around town. And then just about the time I was supposed to go, well, I didn't. Stayed in Augusta.
You had an angel riding on your shoulder.
Yeah, I really did. Yeah.
Where did you serve the majority of your time in service?
That was down there in Augusta, Georgia. Yeah.
Augusta, Georgia.
Yeah, I never went anyplace else.
What rank are you most proud to have earned and why?
Well, in the military, rank, if you just keep your nose clean, rank is automatic. You in so many months, you start out as E1, and as soon as basic's over, you're an E2, and then within so many months, you're an E3, which is a private. And then in so many months, you're an E4, or in my case, I was called a Spec 4, a Specialist 4th Class. And a Specialist was more technical versus grunt work, I guess you could call it. And a corporal and an E4 and a Spec 4 is all the same pay scale. But a corporal can command the troops. I wasn't supposed to command any troops. I couldn't tell somebody to do march or whatever and all that, where a corporal could. So they was called Spec 4s then, and I don't know what they're called now. That was back in the Stone Age.
Okay, did you receive medals or citations that?
Nah. I got expert marksmanship. Everybody gets that as long as you can hit the bullseye a couple of times.
Okay.
I always thought, I was in, of course, basic, and then I was in the company to do, when I was in class, and then I was in an instructor company, and then I was, in the summertime, we would support some of the kids that were in college and coming. And all the time I always thought that if all these groups I've been out of, there ought to be some outfit in the Army that could go to war and fight, but none of the ones I was ever in could. You couldn't have depended on us very much. I did, as an instructor company on the post down there, it was primarily a Signal Corps and MP post. Well, of course, I was in the Signal Corps with this, but each instructor company had to furnish 2 guys a month, for a month, to go down to the stockade and be guards. So I had to do that twice, and that was really, really boring. Sat all 8 hours in a tower up there with no radio, no magazines, and the M1 carbine and 5 rounds in your pocket, but you couldn't have any in the weapon. And I couldn't shoot anybody unless they was on my side of the fence. That was really boring, I guarantee you. Once, after the second round I did it, I got to be on guard duty at the gate. And that was interesting because people was coming and going all the time, you know. And one time I really felt like a fool. I had this poor little old private first class that was in the brig. And he was in the brig because at that time there was a tradition in the outlying counties around there. All the sheriffs and everybody, they knew that you was out on 3-day or 4-day leave. You know, they knew what was going on. So you got leave on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and Monday you're supposed to be back at post. So Sunday night they'd just make all the bars and round up a bunch of guys and put them in jail, and then they'd wait till Tuesday to call the Army and say, hey, we've got Private so-and-so over here, because they would pay them to hold them until they came and got them. And there was a lot of poor kids that just happened to be an hour or so wrong, in the wrong place at the wrong time. So I had one of these kids, and his mom and daddy and little sister had come to see him. And he's just a little old kid. At that time, I'm 23 years old. I went in at 22. So I got to march him over to the chapel. So I've got to hold this 45 on him while I march him over there to the chapel to see his mommy and daddy and his poor little sister. And the kid's just scared to death, you know, and he's crying and everything. And you really feel like a fool when you're doing that.
Did you even have bullets in your gun?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That time you did
well,
have
if he'd have made a
bullets.
move, I'd have shot him.
I don't believe that.
Yeah, it was. The Army is, of course, it's altogether different now, but the Army, once you learned the rules, you know, and just kept your mouth shut and your nose clean and did the minimum required, it was a great place to be, especially if you wasn't married, you know. You didn't have to worry about saving any money. You always had a place to eat, something to eat, and a place to sleep. Now, when you was married, it was a little different deal because you couldn't eat on post. You had to eat out of your allotment. And at that time, Rosie got $90 and I got $30 a month. And that was what we lived on. And if it hadn't been for Rosie working, you know, we'd have starved to death. She did everything in the world that could be done, from babysitting to working in office. She worked in the laundry for a while. And that working in the laundry paid off real good because on all those old posts, if you're a high up officer, when you retire, like if you're over the engineers and you retire, you usually just slide into some civilian position on the post. Well, this lieutenant colonel, he slid into position of running the laundry. Well, Rosie's working for him, and I'm just about ready to get out and be shipped out somewhere else. And she's telling him her sad tale of woe that I might get shipped out, and next thing I know, I'm a teacher. You know, that's just how things work in the Army. And if you're the mess sergeant, you're one of the most popular guys on post because you can always trade some hamburger or some steaks for something else, you know, and that's how it used to work. I had this one kid that we were good friends with. He taught in a building right next to mine. He was in California. And like I say, nobody had any money. If you had $2 in your pocket, you were rich, you know. So he was always bringing, he'd work in a mess hall, and he's always bringing home stuff to eat. And between the three families that we all ran around, one night he brought home 5 gallons of fried potatoes.
5 gallons,
so
that's a lot of fried potatoes.
That's a lot of fried potatoes. We ate every one of them. And then towards the end of the month, Ben's Rosie had a job of all this group of kids that we ran around. We were better off than anybody else because she had a job, you know. So we fed a lot of them at the end of the month. Macaroni and cheese. You could buy a package of macaroni and cheese at the PX for 10 cents. And we ate a lot of macaroni and cheese. Butch Wolf came down one time, and he came over and we fed him macaroni and cheese a whole bunch of times. One time later, Rosie was talking to his wife about it, and she said, "Butch just hates macaroni and cheese," she said. But he ate it while he was down there. The Army was, I mean, it's good for you. If you're not out there where somebody's shooting at you, it's really a good place, because that's the first place 99% of the kids go that somebody says, no, you can't do that, and yes, you will do this. Because, like I said, most of the kids that I had, I was older than them, and they was always complaining. They can't do that, they can't do that. And I says, yes, they can, and they're going to. So just ride with it, and you'll be just fine. Once you learn the rules. As far as teaching me something on the outside, I did learn a lot about electronics, and AC and DC electricity, and that's helped me a lot. As far as the engines, of course, I grew up on a farm, so I didn't learn much there, but I did learn AC and DC electricity, and I had a good time. Met a lot of people, and Georgia was a really nice place to be. If you'd had any money, you could really had a good time there, because it's sportsman's paradise, Georgia was. But the Army had places that you could go. There was a lake just about 10 miles up from town, and they had an Army area that you could go and for free get boats and fishing poles and everything, you know. So we did that a lot. Then when like I say, when I got out, just ready to get out, they froze us all in there and kept us 3 months and 7 days. But that worked out really for the benefit of me. That turned out a really good deal, because it got me out all that reserve stuff. At the time, I didn't think it was good, but it turned out it was.
Did you meet some special people?
Oh yeah, we met friends. There's only one friend that we still run around with, or don't run around with, communicate with, and he lives in Arkansas. He was the guy that got the fried potatoes. And he was always in trouble. He lived in this apartment house, and he had this neighbor that was always giving him a bunch of trouble. So he thought it would be real funny one time if he'd take 3 or 4 railroad players and an alarm clock and some wire and wrap them all up in gray tape and put them in front of his door. Well, he did. Well, the next thing we know, we get this call. George is down at the police station in jail. We had to go down and hawk his wife's sewing machine so we could get him out of jail.
How'd they know it was him?
Oh, everybody in the world would have known it was him. Just the way he was.
So is he about the only one you've kept in contact with through the years?
Other than the guys that was here in Newkirk, none of them were in my outfit. They just passed through. Donnie Balker passed through, and he passed, Butch passed through, and a couple of guys I used to work with in Polka, they kind of passed through, you know, and you just see them for a week or so, then they're gone.
Okay, what was the best and worst military food you were served?
Well, when you were in basic, the first went in, the food wasn't very good. You know, you got scrambled eggs that were only about half scrambled, and they were powdered eggs to start with, and it wasn't very good. But once you got to a permanent company, the food was real good. It really was. It was as good as you could get in a restaurant, and there was always plenty of it. The Army motto was, take all you want, but eat all you take.
So you and Rosie lived off base.
Mm-hmm.
Now then, did you eat lunch there on base? Or did you at home?
I took sandwiches with me.
Okay.
Oh, every once in a while you sneak into the mess hall when nobody was looking, you know, get in line, as long as they didn't catch you. Well, you just ate.
Tell me a funny story you experienced that could only happen in the military.
Oh, gosh, I can't. Well, the one about Eisenhower and the trees was about the funniest. that was... And you know, you stand around doing stuff like that, and you just want to say, this is really stupid, but you just do it anyhow. Because if you didn't do it, well then you're up against the hard knocks, and you learn. That's the best thing you can learn is they're going to do what they want to do, and as long as you go with the flow, everything will work just fine.
Kind of makes you wonder about some of the other stuff we've seen. How much of it was
Oh, yeah.
spray painted green
Yeah.
with cut off trees. How did your military experience affect your life today?
Oh, it is a big help. You know, I learned along with those other kids that, you know, these are things that have to be done, and you just do it. And even though I was older than that and I was telling them that they needed to do it, I learned that myself also, you know. And you learn that things just have to be done. You have to, I mean, like, you know, when we didn't have any money, you learned to cope with it. You know, you didn't cry baby to somebody that you didn't have any money. You just did something so you get money. You get an extra job somewhere. Say Rosie would do whatever it took, because you know we had a car we was making payments on, we had rent we had to buy, and then we had to eat, all on $120 a month. You know, of course this was back in 1950, 1960. It wasn't today's prices, but still, you didn't need any T-bones. But we lived over it. Like everybody says about the Army, I wouldn't do it again, but I'm sure glad I did it the first time.
Do you have any other stories you'd like to tell us that we haven't touched on here?
No, that's about it. I've gotten the benefit from the Army. I have a hearing problem, and in power generation, you're around a lot of motors. It's making a lot of noise, and so I have a hearing problem. And I went to the VA once, just a few years ago. I should have went 100 years ago, and to see what could be done about it. I thought you could just get a VA card. Well, you can't just get a VA card. You have to have a disability. So I went and talked to him about it, and the lady down at Oklahoma City, she was a real nice girl. She said, Mr. Coffey, she said, you're not going to get any help from the VA because you make too much money. That's kind of the way it is in society nowadays. But she says you can go appeal that. So I did. I went down to Ponca and met with a guy from the Oklahoma Veterans Association. He's kind of a liaison between you and the Federal Veterans Association. And he took down all my data and everything. And as soon as he looked at my MOS, he said, oh, you can't hear, can you? I said, well, you're right. He said, I can tell from your MOS that you have hard hearing. So he got me hooked up with a doctor over at, he said, I'm going to send you over to Tulsa to a doctor. Check your hearing. So I did. And this doctor said, yeah, you got a hearing problem, and I got tinnitus really bad. Like right now, it feels like a storm going through my head. Just you hear this noise, this air all the time. So he says, he took all of that and run me through a bunch of tests. And he says, you'll be hearing from us. And like everything else, I go home and I said, yeah, right, I won't ever hear anything. Well, sure enough, about 2 months later, I get this letter from the Veterans Association and saying, you qualify for a 10% disability, and we're going to send you $133.77 a month for it. So that worked out good.
Yes, it did.
Now I got to go. I am getting ready to go to the VA, and see about hearing aids. I don't, this noise in my head, sometimes, like right now, it's not too bad now, but sometimes it just gets to where you just can't hardly stand it. It's like a real hard, strong wind blowing all the time. So that was kind of the good and the bad of it.
Does that happen at certain times of the day or in certain conditions, or
It
you
just happens.
Just happens?
Sometimes, some doctors say it's stress or cause it make it worse. And sometimes when you're somewhere where it's really quiet, then it's really loud then. But,
well, that's all the
I
questions
think
I
that's
have.
about it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your service. We appreciate
Well,
it.
it's like I say, it's one of them things at the time, you say, why in the hell am I here? But after it was all over, you think, well, it wasn't too bad. Nobody was ever shooting at me.
That's a good